We wanted to build a global brand. Believe it or not, because of David Beckham, people all over the world know. If I say to you, do you know who the LA Galaxy is? The answer is universally yes. That's where David Beckham played. And so
Meet Larry Freedman, co-president of the Los Angeles Football Club. With decades of experience in sports marketing and a lifelong passion for football, Larry brings unique insights into the business and global impact of the beautiful game.
What do you think makes an effective ownership group?
it's very important that the governance structure be organized and tight. We have 3 co-managing owners, and that is where the bulk of decision-making comes from.
What excites you the most about the next decade? What are we going to see, and what will change in the world of professional sports?
I think that
Welcome back to the Berkida Podcast. Today, I'm really pleased and honored to be joined by Larry Freedman, who is an owner and co-president of the MLS team LAFC. So much exposure in the world of football, Larry, and let me, it's a great honor, as I was saying, to have you on the Berkida Podcast. I guess to start with, how did you get involved with football or soccer, as perhaps we should call you, given your, location?
Well, first, thank you for having me. And my history with the game of football goes back to my childhood growing up outside of Chicago, Illinois. Played club football for a German social club called Han Fortuna United, HF United,
Amazing.
which, not surprisingly, was born out of the coming together of 2 separate social clubs, Han and Fortuna, hence HF United. And we played in a league in the city of Chicago that was, fairly ethnic, right? Chicago's a very diverse community, always has been. Huge Polish population. So, you had Polish social club, Italian, Mexican, etc. And, I also played in high school. I was a goalkeeper, though I am not a very tall person. I was a goalkeeper.
We shared that.
And
I
yeah,
used to play as goalkeeper too when I was
there
a
you
young
go.
kid, but yeah,
This is why we get
fair
along
enough.
so well. So, really enjoyed the game growing up and playing. And at the time, the North American Soccer League, which is one of the several predecessors to MLS, was
hmm
around. And for you or folks that are listening who aren't familiar with the North American Soccer League, that was when players like Pele and Beckenbauer and Johan Cruyff and Gerd Mueller came over to the US late in their playing days. And for a moment, and there was Giorgio Canalia was a big
hmm
striker for
Of
the New York
course,
Cosmos with
of
Pele.
course. Yeah.
And, there was a moment where that league was filling NFL football stadiums because of players like Pele, and the New York Cosmos had a star-filled roster. But eventually, the out-of-control spending of owners on players caused the league to go under. But, we had season tickets to the team in our market, the Chicago Sting. The biggest name player on the team was a striker from Germany, Karl-Heinz Granitza. We
Okay.
also had some
Uh,
other uh, players that people might recognize names: Arno Steffenhagen, Wim van
hmm
Hannigan, who was on the Netherlands national team that played Germany in the final in like 1972. And then many years later, after not working in sports, I got involved in sports. I actually worked in baseball for a while with our executive chairman, Peter Guber, who is also an owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers in Major League Baseball. He is
hmm
also an owner of the Golden State Warriors in the NBA.
Yeah.
And in and around 2012, 2013, Peter started having conversations about getting involved in Major League Soccer with an expansion club in Los Angeles, and would always say to me, look, if I do this, there might be something for you to do. And in 2014, he did it. And there was certainly something for me to do. And here we are.
And I mean, that has been, quite a journey, right? I mean, 2014, there was an expansion, bid one, but there was no stadium, there was no squad, there was no fan base. I guess there wasn't even a logo. So what was the vision? How did you get, what did you start? How did you get to build the LAFC into what it is today? And obviously, also hiring some great players along the way, including another
Sure.
Giorgio, right? Like
Yes,
Giorgio Chiellini.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. So, it's an interesting experience to start a club from nothing because you're
Hmm.
able to open the book and there's a blank page. And, you can look at people inside of the club, people who are interested in being supporters and fans of the club, and ask the question, what story do we want to tell? And for us, we looked at obviously the LA Galaxy, the club that David Beckham played for, that ultimately Zlatan Ibrahimovic played for, Robbie Keane played for, many others, Landon Donovan. And we looked at what they had done in the market and what they didn't do in the market. And we had some ideas on a different approach. We also had the benefit of being able to study Chivas USA, which was
Hmm.
the MLS's first attempt at a second club in the LA market,
Yes.
which was, founded and owned and run by the same group that owns Chivas Guadalajara and Liga Max.
Hmm.
And we were able to look and say, all right, that was not successful. Why was it not successful? And where we landed with all of the diligence and study that we did was that we wanted to build a community and build a club. Very important distinction, right? We weren't building a franchise, which is a word used in professional sports in the US, and we weren't setting out to build a team. We were building a club and a community, and we wanted to do that in a way that was authentic to the world's game, the beautiful game. And so we spent time predominantly in Europe, and most of that time was spent in the country of Germany with friends at Borussia Dortmund,
Okay.
learning about, all right, this club started in 1909 in a church. Tell us the journey from that moment to today and the yellow wall and Signal Iduna Park that is, sold out and people are hanging from the rafters no matter who the opponent is, no matter what the competition is, no matter what the record of the team is. Are they winning? Are they not winning? And we learned a lot. And so our vision was we wanted to build a community. We wanted to be authentic to the world's game. And from a branding perspective, we had this crazy aspiration as a handful of people sitting in a room staring at a piece of paper that said, congratulations, you have expansion rights. We wanted to build a global brand because, believe it or not, because of David Beckham, people
Hmm.
all over the world know. If I say, do you know who the LA Galaxy is? The answer is universally yes. That's where David Beckham played. And so we had our eye on that kind of recognition from the time we started. And speaking of your friend Giorgio Chiellini, we also knew that in Los Angeles, whether it's the Dodgers,
Hmm.
the Lakers, the Rams, the LA Kings, this is a town where star players are expected.
Hmm.
Fans, supporters expect big name
Yeah.
players, whether it's Mookie Betts or Shohei Ohtani at the LA Dodgers,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, Wilt Chamberlain at the LA Lakers, you know, Matthew Stafford at the LA Rams, or Wayne Gretzky, arguably the greatest hockey player of all time, played for the LA
Hmm.
Kings. So we knew that we would need to meet that bar. And, we started with Carlos Vela, who had played in Europe and was a
Yeah.
star on Mexico's national team at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And fortunately for us, we have been able to follow that with players like Hugo Lloris, who was the captain of the French national
Tottenham.
team,
And Tottenham
right?
also, right? Yeah.
And Olivier Giroud was here for a
Hmm.
bit. And we had a great run, short as it was, with Gareth Bale, who helped us win a MLS Cup. And, Giorgio, captain of the Italian national team, arguably, you know, one of the greatest defenders of all time in the beautiful game, was here. He's now a member of our ownership group, a very active participant in that group, and a wonderful resource and friend. And now with Sun Hung Min, captain of the South Korean national team, we feel like we're making progress on the continuum of building a global brand. And we've been fortunate. We've participated 4 times in CONCACAF Champions Cup, which ultimately feeds to the Club World Cup.
Hmm.
And in that inaugural version of the expanded Club World Cup that happened here 2 summers ago, we were fortunate enough, when there were issues with Club Leon's participation in that tournament because of joint ownership with Pachuca. There was a playoff game. We had lost to Leon. Club America was the highest ranked team in the region, 1 game playoff. We won. We got to participate in the Club World Cup. And, one of our matches was on a Monday afternoon in Atlanta, Georgia at Mercedes Benz Stadium, where a club that had only been playing for 8 seasons was playing Chelsea, who went on to win the tournament. So we feel like our vision of becoming a global brand has made some progress. We have a long way to go, but we've made
Yes.
some
Yes.
progress.
No, it's incredible. And I guess, what is interesting, like, when people think about LAFC, and it ties to what you were saying, is that it feels authentic, right? You build the cultural aspects behind it. And I guess, you were talking about spending time with Borussia Dortmund. I mean, was there other inspiration that you got, from companies, let's say, outside of the football world, given, I mean, you are in one of the richest, like state, geography, countries in the world, Was there other technology company, entertainment company, other sectors where you got inspiration for building
Yes.
the ecosystem?
So we had no shortage of big dreams from the start. And we committed that we didn't want, we wanted to be the best organization in Major League Soccer, but we didn't feel like the bar was high enough. And so we said, all right, what about the best organization in sports?
Hmm.
And we didn't feel like that bar was high enough to really have as a stretch goal.
Yeah.
And so we thought at the time about, and again, this is in 2014. So
Hmm.
you think in the US, you think, okay, Google, Facebook was the name of the company at the time, since has
Yeah.
evolved to Meta. You look at an upstart that people were, very skeptical of, like Tesla. And, for in the beginning, there were huge doubters of Tesla. Like, that's never going to work. People aren't
Ah.
going to buy those cars. They're going to vanish. And today it's a very different story. So we wanted to be as high a quality of a business, because at the end of the day, it's sports, but it is a business, and you are building an organization. And we wanted to be technology forward, always pushing the envelope on the edge. We often say we'll try anything once, right? Because if it works, You continue. If it doesn't work, you stop and you move on. And we wanted to be an organization where players wanted to play and people wanted to support. And from a working perspective, and it created an environment where people wanted to be. And, in aspiring to those heights, we've looked at organizations of all kinds, all sizes, throughout all industries.
Understood. And I guess, that is, something that is required. I mean, we will talk about the institutionalization of sport, and, I think it's something that we're obviously seeing beyond football. But I agree with you, there is still a lot to do in that space. So that's sorry for the loaded question, and thank you very much for the honest answer. But
Yeah.
going back to you obviously have a fantastic ownership group, right? With a lot of successful entrepreneurs, successful even players. So at some point, I'm sure, you have quite a lot of voices. But let me ask you, what do you think makes an effective ownership group, and how do you, in these dynamics where we see institutional capital coming in, how can, an ownership group also interact with, the likes of the big credit funds or the big, equity funds coming at play?
So I think it's important to know that our ownership group, while it's large, 30 some
Mhm.
owners, give or take, it's very important that the governance structure be organized and tight.
Yeah,
So we have three co-managing owners, and that is where the bulk of decision making comes from. At the same time, each and every one of our owners is in the group not because we needed his or her money. They are in the group because they were committed to building a world class organization and taking advantage of the voice and the platform that you have as a sports organization, and what we believe is the obligation to get out in the community and do good work and make the world a better place, give back. And everyone in the group understands to varying degrees that we have them in the group because they have value to add, and that we're going to call them and we're going to ask them to do various things, and that they have signed up for that. So, at the one end of the continuum, you have someone like Magic Johnson or Mia Hamm or Nomar Garcia Parra, Will Ferrell, who are celebrities
Mhm.
and have very busy calendars. And I can't call them every day or every week or even every month and say, hey, can you help us with this or can you help us with that? But a small handful of times throughout the course of a year, we have that opportunity. And that is a wonderful asset for us. And at the same
Yeah.
time, at the other end of the spectrum, you have someone like a Brandon Schneider, who is the president of the Golden State Warriors and the Chase Center,
Mhm.
or Lon Rosen, who had been the chief marketing officer at the LA Dodgers and is now the president of business operations at the LA Lakers. So you have people doing what we do. So whether it's ticketing, partnerships, merchandise, whatever it is, we have people that we can call every day and have
Great
a
experience.
dialogue, right? Where I can call or someone else on my team can call and say, hey, we know you are also doing this, or we're thinking about doing this. Have you done it? How did it
Mhm.
go? And so I think the wonderful thing about our group is it is a group of people who all enjoy each other and actually are happy to be partners with one another, are committed to the cause, and understand that, you know, when you make an investment in this organization, you don't sit back, put your feet up, and watch. you need to be an active participant. And it has worked really, really well for us. And the reality is that you can look around ownership groups in Major League Soccer, in other sports in the United States, and now it's getting into European football as well, where the groups are getting larger, and oftentimes big name celebrities, athletes, movie stars are part of it. And in some cases, like Wrexham, right? Wrexham is the
Yeah.
extreme. Those guys are very involved. It's been very
Mhm.
successful. It's been wonderful. But oftentimes you have, whether it's a regular investor or it's a celebrity investor, they are not vested in the organization. They're not actively involved.
Yeah.
They're very, very passive. And at LAFC, there's no room for passive investors.
That's quite a smart point, because you do need, make sure that those collaboration comes into fruition and contributes to building, I guess, enterprise value at the end of the day, right? As you were saying, although professional sports is still a sport, is also a business. And I think
Yes.
it's important to think of it that way. So one of the things I was going to ask you is, as you think about, managing, the business aspects of a professional sports team, I'm sure infrastructure is playing a role too, right? So how have you thought about the importance of venue development? What are your learnings there? What is your point of view about, controlling more infrastructure as a professional sports organization? And was that
Yeah.
useful for LAFC?
Yes. Yes. So for us, owning and controlling our venue is critically important because, first and foremost, you want to be in full control of the experience, because more and more the experience needs to be robust, right? So we always talk here in Los Angeles about, I have to convince you to get off your couch, walk away from your 65, 75, 85-inch HD television that's delivering a beautiful experience to you in your own home, where you can go to the refrigerator, get a cold beer. You can pause the broadcast to
Yeah.
go to the restroom. You don't have to worry about parking, standing in line, right? And
Yeah.
you're not paying for the ticket, and you're not paying venue prices for food and drinks. So there has to be something compelling about the
Mhm.
experience, right? It is no longer a world where it is enough for me to say to you, you buy the ticket, you get to come watch the game. That's what this is all about. There needs to be more. And if you don't control all aspects of the venue where that event is taking place, my view is you're at a disadvantage. And there are teams in a variety of leagues in the US where that's not the case, right? You're
Yeah.
a rent paying tenant in NHL hockey arena or an NBA basketball arena, or, some of the teams in our league play in NFL stadiums. And, I believe, and other people may have different opinions, that if you're not in the position to control that experience, you're at a disadvantage. If you don't have full control of the calendar of when events get scheduled, you're at a disadvantage. And from a business perspective, we just feel like it is a much better proposition to own the venue. Because imagine, it's a very stark difference if you're a team in our league and you own the venue and you have the right to go sell the naming rights to the venue and other entitlements in the venue. Do you want to name a club space? Do you want your brand on a gate where the bulk of the fans enter? And versus you're playing in an NFL stadium and those revenue opportunities are not yours.
That's Look, I big believer of the importance of also, looking at developing additional ways to, let's call it, quote unquote, monetize
Yes.
the franchise, right? And I think, you need to believe there is something that is not tied to the success on the pitch, right? Otherwise, you get too exposed. But let me also broaden a little bit the conversation and think about the broader MLS, right? I mean, I think, now everybody knows what the MLS is. I'm sure Messi is, some of their players obviously you've also hired, but definitely Messi has been one of the biggest names that have come into the competition. And, you know, what do you think has surprised you the most about the way the MLS has evolved? And what do you think, perhaps other football executives still misunderstand about the MLS?
Yeah. So I think, the league is now 30-ish years old, and it is very different, right? It was born out of the 1994 World Cup
Mhm.
and, started out with a couple handfuls of teams, and a lot of the ownership was folks that owned NFL teams in American football. And the notion was, well, this is great. I already own a venue. I can have this global football team play in my American football venue. And over time, what ownership and the league learned was that what we refer to as soccer specific stadiums were the better idea, where, NFL stadiums have capacities of 50, 60, 70,000 people. And, the popularity of the sport here just didn't warrant that size of a stadium. So when you started in Columbus and elsewhere building soccer specific stadiums where the capacities were 18, 20, 22, 25,000 people, and you could fill those stadiums, that was very telling and, positive for Major League Soccer. And then over time, as global supporter culture found its way into our stadiums, that was a big change also, because now you have an environment where we have people come from all over the world, fans of clubs from all over the world. We have executive leadership and players from clubs all over the world coming into our stadium, whether it was folks from Tottenham when they were in the process of designing and building their new venue, our partners from Bayern Munich, the first time they came into the building, our friends from
Yeah.
Borussia Dortmund, Mbappe has been at a game in our building, and. And I think everyone walks in the door with a certain expectation, and then the whistle blows, and we have kickoff, and the 3252, our independent supporter union, the drum hits, and they start chanting, and they do not stop chanting, singing, the whole thing for 90 plus minutes, and the building is full. And the reaction universally of folks who are expecting something less, all end up saying things like, this felt like I was home.
Mhm.
I felt like I was in Europe. And that is what is happening throughout Major League Soccer, so that, you know, we have diverse environments in every city where we play. The
Mhm.
makeup of that diversity is different, but you have people from all over the world, first generation, third generation, whatever it is, who may have families that, hey, my grandfather is a Club America person, therefore I am too, or
Mhm.
I'm a Man U person because of, my great great grandfather. But, ultimately, people want to enjoy the beautiful game live and in person. And when you have authentic global football environments and you marry that with an ever improving quality of play in our league, you have, young stars that are making a name for themselves, and then they're getting sold on to clubs in Europe or South America or Mexico or wherever they're going. And you have players like Leo Messi, who is still playing at the highest level. And we're watching it, and he still looks like the best player in the world. And he plays in this league. And therefore, other high quality players should feel perfectly comfortable saying, I want to go live in the United States, live in Canada, compete in MLS, because the quality of play is ever improving.
Yeah, look, to be fair, it's a pitch that in one of my previous roles you would try to do, to the MLS, right? I mean, invest really not just in players, I guess, at the peak of their career, but also in, what are the youngest stars, right? I mean,
Right.
what if you were to get the Due of the world, the Yamal of the world, you name them, coming early on. And I think, to be fair, yes, it would cost money, but actually the appetite that you're saying, like if you were to tell, let's say, rather than playing in, XYZ, you can go and play in Los Angeles, you can play in Miami, that certainly has its attraction. So I think you definitely have a strength there. But you were talking how the MLS kind of was born on the back of the World Cup. But what do you think will success look like? How do we define success of hosting the World Cup? What do you think, you get out of, this experience?
Yeah. Well, first, success. We wanted to put on a great tournament, and that Los Angeles, Seattle, Kansas City, all of the host cities. We wanted
Hmm.
to have great environments, buildings that were full, and we were pretty confident that the good football would follow. And with the expanded, format of 48 clubs, 48 nations, which is some very surprising results, but super competitive games. And on the other side of it, the hope is that you have this heightened interest in the game of global football here in the US and Canada, where our league is. And our opportunity is to tell the story about all of the players in our league, Nashville,
Absolutely.
Tennessee, Austin,
Yes.
Texas. It's easy to think, sure, in Chicago, and Lewandowski now going to Chicago is a wonderful thing.
Absolutely.
Anecdotally, people
Yeah.
have always said that, Chicago has the largest Polish population outside of Warsaw, Poland. Whether that's true or not, who knows? But this should
Probably
be
found out.
wonderful. Yeah, we're going to find out. It should be wonderful for the Chicago Fire.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so I think, this is just an opportunity where, we have 30 great clubs in this league with exciting players, some big name players. Antoine Griezmann coming to Orlando. That's very, very exciting. And so hopefully all of these factors with the wave coming out of the World Cup bode very well for the future of Major League Soccer.
Very, I mean, this has been incredibly, incredibly, interesting, and obviously, it's so much experience that you can share with us, and I really appreciate that. But let me maybe just ask with one final question, if I may, which is, looking ahead, there is so much talk about, new technologies in fan engagement, AI, maybe, footballs, professional sports organization becoming more media companies. But what excites you the most about the next decade, for, let's say, football, sports more broadly? What do you think is going to be, what are we going to see and what will change in the world of professional sports?
Yeah, I think that, as has always been the case, as technology advances, it provides an incredible opportunity for all of us to enhance the fan experience and to take the fan experience outside of the walls of the venue where the match is taking place and bring more and more people into the fold. I'm old enough to have grown up at a time where you didn't have the ability to consume games. They
Hmm.
all weren't on TV.
Yeah.
And now, you have the opportunity. We can consume all sports all over the world pretty much at our pleasure. Things are on demand, they're streaming.
Yes.
And also grew up at a time where, if you wanted to be a fan and a follower of a team outside of your market, you really couldn't do that. But now we all have this wonderful device. There is this thing called the internet, and there's cell service for the cellular phones. And we can, the notion of what community can you build, right? So we're sitting around, even we're a really young club where we started in 2014. The first time we kicked the ball was 2018. And, as we look ahead to our 10th season playing, and if you think about how much the world has changed and technology has advanced, and these experiences and the opportunities to engage have changed from when we wrote that check in 2014 to get the expansion rights to what the world looks like today and the opportunity to truly engage globally with a fan base and bring people into the tent. It's incredible. It's just incredible. A very small example is you think about MLS on Apple TV.
Hmm.
If you have a device, all
Yeah.
kinds of different devices, you can have a television, you can have a smartphone, you can have a tablet, you can have a laptop. If you have internet access or cell service, you can watch MLS pretty much anywhere in the world. And the notion for us specifically, we signed Sun Hung Min. We're able to make a partnerships with a linear provider and a streaming provider, SPO and Coupang, in South Korea, so that fans of the player and the South Korean national team can watch all of his games. You know, 10, 15, certainly 20 years ago, that wasn't a thing. So this opportunity to engage and build community and fandom
Hmm.
outside of, your obvious geography of Kansas City or Houston or Los Angeles is just incredible.
Absolutely. And Larry, thank you very much. It's been a fascinating conversation, not just about sport, but also culture, entrepreneurship, leadership. So really appreciate you taking the time. And thank you very much for joining me on the Berkida podcast. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Pleasure. Thank you for joining me on the Berkida podcast. I'm sure you have enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to continuing our journey and continue to talk with investors, executives, operators in the world of sports. So please give us a follow and hopefully continue to enjoy this conversation. All the very best. Thank you.